Welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the program, and I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. Pretty cloudy out there, hazy. I could see all of about 10 feet in front of me as I drove to the studio, but you know, being the trooper I am, I found my way here, and so I'm happy that you're here with us too. I wanted to just start off with something brief. Several years ago in church, one of our junior pastors and his wife gave a little talk to the parishioners, and I took notes, and I'm so glad I did, because I don't know about you, but for me at this time of life, I need to really think about this, and it's about minimalism. Finding more joy in life, pursuing less, not more. And that discontent is the greatest force for change. You know, spending a lot of money and looking at our spending habits and so forth, they said less things that we have, the less stress we have, and the more time we have for our passions. Now, I found myself to be a collector of things, just things, nothing specific, as I've aged, and so this really struck home with me. So in order to simplify your life and decrease your stress, you need to start by being convinced that you need to get rid of stuff. Start with the easiest place and be prepared for emotional reactions. And I understand that because I become connected to things. Break the consumerism trend, stop watching TV, give things away, value the invisible, and remember that your time is too precious to be burdened by stuff. So that's mainly my message to me, but I hope it resonates with some of you as well. Okay, I want to introduce one of my favorite guests. He drove all the way here in the fog from, where do you live again?
Try Rutland.
Rutland. That's about an hour and a half away.
It's a long trip up through the city at these hours when the city is dumping all the cars on the highway and trying to come north. People getting out of the city as fast as they came, coming up to St. Albans. You know, a lot of people live in St. Albans but work down in the Burlington area.
I know, and the traffic at that time when you were driving up can be pretty tough.
Whiskey, Colchester, Milton, all those, Fairfax, Georgia, all those little exits.
Yeah. Well, let me first tell people who you are.
That'd be good.
Mike Lannon, welcome back, my friend.
Welcome back. Good to see you again, Linda. Yeah.
Yeah, we always have fun.
Yeah.
Mike is an educator, and he's a phenomenal educator, I will say, and he is also the host of a TV program in Rutland called The Conservative. So now you have two of us to deal with tonight. But we do know how to have fun.
Yes, we do.
But we also get serious about important things.
Well, you know, Linda, I'm very glad that you've had me come back again. And I just had a conversation just recently with a group of school teachers who know that I am a conservative. And they immediately said, well, that means you're a Republican. I said, that does not mean I'm a Republican. Conservatives don't necessarily have any party affiliation. A conservative like myself and very much like Linda, we basically have four tenets that we talk about. So when you're listening to me, you know, I really believe very firmly that the Constitution of the United States as written is what we should be following. I believe in very limited government. I don't believe that we should be chasing after large government tenets that tell us what we should or should not do. I believe that long before I depend upon the person in the room or mom and dad or anybody else, I'm going to be self-reliant first. I'm going to try very hard to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And then I firmly believe that no one has a right to take a life. Flat out, those are my conservative views, and so I'm steady on those, and I don't flip flop all over the place on them. So when you're talking to me, you know basically my four tenets. That's who I am.
And isn't it nice that you know who you are?
Known since the 5th grade, Linda. I've never changed.
Yeah. Well, and guess what? Where do you think most of those views came from?
Mom and Dad, number one, the church life, the spiritual side of things, the intellectual side, the physical side. I had a great 5th grade teacher that taught me American history that lasted right to this day. I mean, what she taught me in the 5th grade about the American Revolution took me right through high school, took me right through college, and that's how I teach. I teach 5th grade American history the same way that she taught me. Hasn't changed a bit.
You know, I have spoken to some students at one of the schools, and the first time I did that, I brought along my folder of notes from my 8th grade U.S. history class. Still have them to this day. Mr. Hunter was my favorite teacher. He made United States history come to life. It was just such a great class. I'll never forget it.
And I suspect that everybody out there that's viewing tonight can remember back their education. They've got 1 or 2 teachers that they really remember that inspired them and kept them going. And lots of us of that older generation of students, which I call learners today, a big difference. So if you've got a student at home, remember they're studying subjects, which is what mostly Linda and I did. Studied for tests, did well, remembered some of that material. Learners acquire knowledge, and that's a big difference between a student and a learner. So I teach learners, I educate and coach learners basically. But my favorite teacher, I had 3 in my lifetime, and I remember them very fondly, but my first one was my 5th grade teacher, Miss Morris, who became, darn it, a Mrs. Kennedy. So there we go. She crushed me halfway through the year.
Did you have a crush on her?
Oh yeah, she crushed me halfway through the year.
I had a crush on Mr. Hunter too. He was such a nice man.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, education is very important, and
that's funny.
We know, watching what's going on in our school systems today, that we really have to take a real hard look at what we're doing in the world of education all through this country. We've watered it down. We don't expect as much from our learners as was expected from me. And I tell people all the time that are coming out of college, I had a better high school education often than folks that are coming out of college today. That's an awful thing to say because they're spending a fortune.
Breaks my heart.
They're spending a fortune to get a college education that wasn't as good as the one that I got in high school.
Well, when you have students
just to say
graduating from high school and entering college and needing remedial reading, why are they in college?
Well, number one, college is not for everybody, and I don't know why we have a system in place that says everybody has to be prepared for college. I'll tell you something. If you can read a blueprint, if you're good, well, there's basically 7 intelligences if you think of what Howard Gardner from Harvard talked about. And one of those intelligences is the mechanical ability. So if you're a good carpenter and you're a 10-year-old and you can swing a hammer and cut wood, be thinking about those kinds of trade skills, plumbing, electrician. They are going to make serious money in the years to come. If you go to college and you become a basket weaver, I don't know of many jobs out there for basket weaving, and I don't know of many jobs when people come out of college and they say, hey, my degree's in philosophy. I think that's wonderful. You've had a good training mentally, but I don't know a lot of people that are going to hire a philosopher. Mm-hmm. Just the way it is. And so you got to think carefully about what you're going to pick and choose to do, because there has to be an economic end out there for you. Otherwise, you're going to have a phenomenal amount of money, unless you're gifted with a lot of money in your back pocket. You're going to owe a lot of money for your college education. And now today, a lot of people will tell you that a lower degree, a BA or a BS, you better have a master's degree. I mean, and a lot of people are being forced to do the PhD. I mean, it's a system of
propagating itself, really.
Of taking more and more money from the one that wants to learn.
Well,
a lot of the college courses, I'll tell you, a lot of college courses you could learn by picking up a book. And I forgot what the name of the movie was, but there was a young guy, and I know the 2 guys that were the actors in it were from Boston, but this kid was phenomenal, and he what he basically did was read books, and he gets into a bar with a Harvard guy, and the Harvard guy's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and this kid that's read the book says, so you're quoting from such and such and such and such, and so I suppose that next thing you'll be saying is such and such and such and such.
He was self-educated, wasn't he?
He was self-educated, and so there's a lot of merit into reading by the lamp in your own room and taking and pacing and thinking about it yourself versus a college education.
It's a changing world, Mike. And so a lot of what you're saying, I think, is that we have to look at the practical. You know, what kind of training for the practical? Like my brother never went to college, but he is so smart. He is self-trained, self-learned, and he can do anything.
Yep.
Whether it's working on cars or building something, putting down tile, doing electrical work, putting in bathroom, he can just do it all.
Well, you know, we could spend the entire amount of time that we have tonight just talking about education, but if you're viewing tonight, just think that the state budget is about $1.6 billion, and then stop and think, what are we getting for it? I mean, the same thing when you think about transportation. I drove up tonight on Route 7. I'd love to know where the money is being spent, because the potholes from Rutland to here are huge. And I know it's a tough winter, but it's still like, where does that transportation money? We never ask these questions, folks. We keep sending the Democrats, the majority of the people in Vermont that are in the legislature, the Democrats, they're spending a ton of money, but what are they spending it on? And that's a question to be asked. I mean, so I've got an education budget. What am I getting? What's the ROI, the return on investment? I've got money going into the transportation fund. What's the ROI? What am I getting for it? I've got money going into health care. What am I getting for it?
Absolutely.
What are the citizens actually getting for
their
those
money.
tax dollars? And it's a great question to ask constantly, because they are your dollars.
Yes,
and we often think that the government can just take that money and they just figure, oh, wow, we've got all this money to spend, and they rob Peter to pay Paul, and they switch money all over the place. Look, this is a dangerous situation that we're in the state of Vermont. And I continue to say, every time I visit with Linda, the fastest growing population in Rutland County is 80 and older. Now, how long do you think those 80-year-olds are going to continue to work? Oh, well, not many of them. And how many of them are going to be able to support the tax structure of Rutland County when the majority of people 45 and under in that county are leaving the state and they're never coming back? So we never hear the legislators in this state talk about that, but we are in a dangerous situation.
Well, the governor's been talking about
he knows.
Demographics.
He better get busy, because there's nothing here for young people to stay in this state and do.
The governor, to his credit, I don't agree with everything he does, but to his credit, he is after the education folks to, I don't know if it was specifically targeted toward the union or how much the union has to do with the cost of education, but he's saying you have to cut the costs. If we have 30,000 fewer students in 20-some years, and we're losing 1,000 a year, we have a very low birth rate in this state, and so we're up the creek without a paddle. People cannot afford. They're talking about a 7% increase in property taxes.
Right.
I don't know about you, but all of these senior citizens that we have a high percentage of in this state don't get a 7% increase every year.
You know, it's always interesting because it's easy to spend your money. I didn't earn it. It's always interesting because even in Washington, D.C., while our two senators were down there in this most recent shutdown, most people have no clue that on the table, all the way through this 42-hour and 14-minute shutdown, our senators were getting a 13% increase. How is that possible?
In their salaries?
Yes. So
who approved that? They did, right?
Sure. They've voted themselves in a 13% increase.
Nice gig if you can get it.
It's a great gig because we don't hear about those things because the media doesn't tell us that they're getting these kind of percentage increases. But it's the only job in the world that they have. They work. They're on with vacation, which I agree with. I'm glad they're on vacation. But they're getting paid to be on vacation because they can't do a lot of damage when they're home and on vacation. When they're down there in Washington, they do a lot of damage because they do nothing. I mean, this is the biggest do nothing.
Well, they do a lot of damage.
Biggest corrupt government I've ever seen and heard about. So anyway.
So who do you think will run against either Peter Welch or Bernie Sanders in the upcoming election?
Well, there's two unknowns. There's a woman that is not even from the state of Vermont who has indicated that she's going to run, and there's a man somewhere in the state, and I can't even pronounce his name, that has said that he's going to run. But they're two absolutely unknown people. In order to upset Bernie Sanders and or Leahy, you've got to have someone that has got a name recognition in the state.
Positive name recognition.
A positive name recognition. And I don't know who that would be in the Burlington area, because I don't know enough about the Burlington area. But in the Rutland County area, you would have to have someone like a John Casella, who's well known. Okay, so John Casella is the man that I don't even know if he has any interest, but I mean, obviously his name is known, and I suspect all over the state. I doubt if he has any interest. But someone that has a name would have to start campaigning now, because you got a huge war chest of money. That's what a war chest means. The
well, that's
money,
what the Democrats
oh,
have.
They've got a huge amount of money to launch a campaign. So the press isn't going to be in favor of whoever steps up. So whoever does run is going to have some money somewhere. And so there will be, if he's got the name recognition and the ability, there'll be a tremendous amount of money coming out of either the Trump organization and or the RNC to help this be upset. But I suspect, because Vermont is so entrenched in socialistic thinking, so many of our viewers are so entrenched in that socialistic thinking that the state can do it all for us, and they ought to do it for us, and want that to happen, that you're not going to have that kind of money be poured into the state of Vermont, even though it'd be nice to dump out 40 years of that kind of Senate. Now, the other thing is that these guys are getting older. Leahy's much older. This time around, Sanders will be 75. I'm not saying that that's wrong. If he's got great health, let him go for it. But I am really, as I get older, as you opened up with a biblical parable there with Jesus' teachings about minimalization, I get the interested in an amendment to the Constitution that says, you go down to Washington, you're not going down there to become a millionaire. You're going down there for 6 years, and that's it.
I agree.
Yep. You got a term
limits.
And because what's happening right now, they go down to Washington, they come back multimillionaires. Every state has the same problem, whether you're a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat. They're walking away with corrupt money. They're being bought off. They're being paid off.
Well, I guess that's why they're not doing what's in our best interest.
Right.
But I just lost my train of thought. We have to. I'm convinced that even one person who has the right message, who is a great communicator, a likable person, who can get that message out to the people, a common sense message, I really think somebody could win.
Well, they'd have to start now, and they'd have to have...
Oh, it's late. It's even late.
They'd have to have the name recognition. And I don't know of too many people in the state of Vermont right now that have that kind of political interest and political will, because the amount of mounted attacks against a person's character, no matter what you run for, is just absolutely ludicrous. And it's very interesting to watch the media in this state. It's interesting to watch what happens here. I was reading the local papers. I was waiting for Linda to come on set. Very interesting to see some of the spin that's going on in that paper. I think it's called the St. Albans Messenger, but I got to read today's copy cover to cover, and it's like, wow, interesting. Just bits and pieces that not the whole truth. Here's an interesting thing about media bias. The other day, they spent this past weekend a lot of time on the Women's March, which let's say there was 100,000 people in Washington. 2 days before that, there were 1 million people down there for the right to life. You did not hear one single word from the media on that powerful, powerful movement that has grown every single year. You haven't heard that today most folks in America that are under the age of 45 do not believe in abortion. We've had a complete switch over, and the young people are saying, no, this is not the way to go. But you're not hearing that reported in the newspapers. But you got to go out and look at the polls. You got to go out and look at the trusted polls. You got to go out and take a look what's going on. You know something I say in my show in Rutland all the time, Linda? Don't just listen to what I'm saying to you. Go out, get off your couch. You're watching this show today. Get off that couch, go do some research. Thomas Jefferson said you needed to do that. Go find out for yourself. And then you'll become much more of a conservative after you start finding out what's going on.
The founders of this country knew that if the people were not vigilant and informed and involved, that our freedoms and our supreme law of the land, our U.S. Constitution, would be useless, because the people have an obligation in a free society. They need to know what's going on. They need to know what their own principles are, what they believe in, and then make sure that they elect people who stand up for the principles.
Well, let's talk about principles real quick.
Okay, and then I want to get to my letter to the governor. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say,
go right ahead.
You triggered something in my mind when you're talking about
for
that.
it.
So we talk about going down to Washington, and Trump's talking about cleaning out the swamp. And most people don't realize is that we have a legal system right now in this country that is two-tiered. One for the elites who pay no price or consequence for their illegal activity, and those of us who are sitting like in this room who if we did the exact same thing, we'd be sitting in jail in about 6 months. So what am I talking about? Well, let's take a look at 5 known cases of illegal activity. 33,000 emails missing from Hillary Clinton's email, classified emails that were on those 33,000. Bit washed and bleached the equipment, broken by her staff so that we'd never be able to recover them. Okay, that's one very interesting tidbit of corruption. Illegal activity. Secondly, you've got Lois Lerner, who conveniently lost 14,000 IRS emails, gone, can't find them. You have Hillary Clinton's 81 Benghazi, the night of the Benghazi incident, gone, can't find them. You've got Hillary Clinton's archives, gone, missing, can't find them. All protected by the federal government. They belong to the American people, never supposed to be gone. And now today, you find out that there's 5 months of FBI text messages missing, all illegal. So the way to solve your legal problems in America today, if you're elite and you want to miss out on stuff, and you destroy the evidence. And nobody does a thing about it. There's no way that you can tell me that these guys down in Washington that are investigating all of this stuff, will it be Mueller or it be Republicans or Democrats, take 2 years to find out what's going on. You try it in the state of Vermont and see whether or not the state's attorney doesn't have you in jail in about 6 months into the story. Go ahead, Linda. You just got me going there. I was like, wow, so corrupt, corrupt.
No, I know. And I think that the current administration in Washington is trying to cleanse the IRS and the FBI and so forth, departments of government, of leftovers from the previous administration who perhaps don't have the upstanding motivation. They're part of the swamp. And so when you come into the presidency and then you have people who have been there with a different perspective and maybe aren't just focusing on their jobs, but their viewpoints are colored by their perspective, their political perspective, then you have a big problem. But I wanted to mention regarding the marijuana
how nice
legalization in this state. The governor has decided to quietly and privately sign the bill rather than having
He thinks his base won't know. That's why they do this. That's why they do the thing. This is Vermont. We knew, Governor, that you were going to sign it in closed session underneath the lamp.
Well,
at about midnight.
I did my due diligence as a citizen, and I sent a letter to the governor about why legalizing marijuana for recreational use, an illegal drug at the federal level. So there you start from there, and nothing should be done anyway. It shouldn't happen. But I gave him all the reasons that I know of. I sent him an article that I was asked to write for a magazine following my resignation from the legislature, because I'd sat on the Health and Welfare Committee, and legalization for medical use had come up at that time. And so I had done my due diligence in investigating all the ins and outs of whether legalization made sense. And then I sent him another letter, I enclosed with this, of suggestions of things that might be tended to in the state. And one of them, as you were talking about the various departments of government, that I believe that it is past time when there needs to be an audit, an outside audit, I would say, of the Agency of Human Services for starters, and the Department of Ed, or the Agency of Education for starters, because those are the most expensive departments for the people to fund. And on top of that, as you know, I don't know if it's up to $5 billion now. It might be. I know it's growing, and that is the pension fund and the health care.
It's unfunded. Yep.
Yeah, unfunded by billions of dollars.
Yep.
We'll say that.
Kick the can down the road and not going to be able to pay for it.
We don't have the money.
Nope.
So why not look, as you said, why not look at what we're spending and what we're getting for the money that is spent? That is the due diligence. That's the responsibility of the people who are elected and appointed by the governor.
Well, that's a very interesting subject, because you mentioned it, the AOE is not the fastest growing budget in the state of Vermont, by the way. Human Services is. That's where the biggest money is being spent.
Well, maybe not. Well,
total budget for Human Services has grown huge over the last 10 years. It's huge. But you're right. Who's looking over and watching exactly how those monies are being expended? And somebody should be doing that. Hull Maynard, who was a senator from the Rutland County area, used to talk about this all the time. And because he was a conservative, principled guy,
I remember him.
He would be poo-pooed, and he was long-winded.
Me
like
too.
You and I can get long-winded, and people would stop listening to him. So you got to be quick in thinking, because this is a short, focused group of people that we're talking to normally. And I suspect even at TV, probably people have clicked on by, even some of you. But if you hang in long enough, you're going to have a couple of things you can leave your couch with tomorrow or tonight, get on the computer and find out how true some of these things are. And then call Linda next week. I won't be here, and blame her for everything I said.
I'll be calling you then. Well, it's about accountability.
Yes, it is.
And you know what? I remember standing there in 2001, January, and taking the oath of office as a legislator. And you take an oath to do no harm, okay? Right. And, uphold the Constitution and all of those good things. And we have gotten so far away from accountability and to the people and responsibility for the actions that are taken.
Well, I mean, I didn't pay that careful attention to the marijuana bill that hit the state of Vermont, because, quite frankly, I'm at the age now where I have to just stop and think about what my choices are. But I can tell you that I was one of the first writers ever of a drug education program with the state of Massachusetts many years ago. And marijuana was at that time one of the big things that we wrote about, because we knew that it was whether anybody wants to agree with this or not, it was a gateway drug, and we knew that it did change the chemical structure of the brain faster than alcohol. Flat out, those are the things that I was able to discover. But all you have to do is go and see literally what's happening in Colorado, who is 2 years ahead of us now in the marijuana pieces.
Fiasco.
And those of you who don't use this drug, there's two potential problems down the road. One, 10 to 15 years from now, the state is going to be coming towards us and asking who is going to pay for the medical rehabilitation of folks that are really in trouble because of their choices. And they're going to ask those of us who don't use alcohol, don't use illegal and or legal drugs inappropriately, including marijuana, and then also smoking, and they're going to ask us to pay for it. Now, why would I say that? Because we know that we're being asked. I've never been a smoker, but I pay tax dollars to take care of people that did. And their choice was to smoke when they knew better. And now I have to pay for it. I have to pay for people that are addicted to all kinds of drugs and to alcohol because I have to pay the tax dollars. That's an unfair use of my dollars to take care of someone who, by choice, picked to smoke, picked to do the drugs. And now we've got marijuana on top of that. And we have an opiate problem in this state. Watch what's going to happen. It's going to grow because those that sell or bring in the drugs, that high is not going to last. They're going to get more and more, and they got to get higher and higher, and so the picture. So I'm totally opposed to the drugs. And the second piece is the death. Now, this is an interesting story, and I told Linda that just before. On occasion, I get going on this roll and let people know. I had a brother that was killed by a drunk driver at 2 a.m. in the morning outside of Keene, New Hampshire, on his way back to Clark University, 2 weeks before he graduated from college. All that money, all that wisdom, all that future gone in a moment by a drunk driver who was going fishing, and he had already had 6 DUIs. Drunk as a skunk, and gone. So that's taking care of us in the future. You're going to have folks that are going to die now on the highways, kill other people too, and I don't care what was sold at the legislature. I'm smart enough to know that that's what's going to happen.
Could you give me one good reason to legalize marijuana?
I can't give you a good one. I cannot give you one good reason.
That's the question I wanted to ask the governor.
Yep,
one good reason.
I'm afraid, and I don't mind saying it, come talk to me. I don't mind having the argument. I'm afraid we have people sitting in the legislature that have absolutely no clue what they're doing. And they are lockstep with the social issues or the socialistic communist agenda. Flat out, that's the way you are. If you're a Democrat right now, that's the way I look at you, because you are not willing to listen to anyone else's opinion. As a matter of fact, because I've just said that, I'm sure I'm going to get phone calls or people are going to come to see me and say, how dare you say that? Well, guess what? We still have a First Amendment, and it's allowed to have free speech to allow me to express my opinion. And those of you way to the left know that you'd love to shut that down. In time, that may happen, but as long as I'm alive, I'm going to fight to my fighting breath for what the Founding Fathers believe. This is exactly the kind of stuff that the Founding Fathers warned us about. Especially lockstep government.
I feel the same way about the Constitution, personal responsibility. You called it self-reliance.
Self-reliance.
The free market. Get government out of our lives. Get out of my kitchen. Get out of my car. Just get out of my life.
Stop right there. Let's talk real quick.
Get off my property.
You're going to love this. Since Donald Trump has been president for 1 year, unemployment is at a record low number. Unemployment for blacks and Latinos is at the lowest number ever. In 1 year's time, there were 850,000 new women brought into the workforce. And here's what the press won't tell you. 30,000 government workers are gone. He is cutting down through the swamp, but you're not hearing about that. So I don't know where those 30,000 got their new job, but I have not felt a hiccup in my pocketbook. I have not felt it, and I don't mean in the pocketbook in that sense. I haven't felt the need to have those 30,000 people down there in Washington working for me. It hasn't affected me at all. And I'll bet you, as you're watching this TV show, you didn't even know that. Can you imagine the number of women that have come into the workforce because Donald Trump became president?
He has a lot of women in high positions in his
people. If you listen to the press, he's the worst person that's ever hit the airways. I was shocked to watch the medical press conference the other day and have some of the stupidest questions ever asked of a medical doctor about the physical health of a president of the United States. Unprecedented that people, number one, it's none of their business. Just tell me he's healthy and leave. And
he passed with flying colors.
That's all I care. I mean, it's none of their business. It just isn't. It's none of your business watching me tonight. am I healthy or not healthy? If I feel like telling you, I will. It's none of your business to know if Linda's healthy. Gee, we have a law called HIPAA that basically says you're not supposed to know another person's health issues.
Yeah,
so
privacy.
this is the media gone amok. And I could spend another hour talking about that.
Well, I can't believe it.
I have case after case to tell you about what's going on. But go ahead, Linda. I'm having fun.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm concerned about the voter checklist.
Yep.
I know that in my community, because I go in there and I talk to them, and they know the voters in our small community, okay? And I believe that they're diligent in keeping things current. But I don't believe that happens everywhere in the state. And the Secretary of State, not long ago, had an article in the paper revealing that, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe it was from January 1st of 2017 to June 30th of 2017. There were 12 or 13,000 new people registered to vote in Vermont. Now, I am very leery about the motor voter scenario. I called the Secretary of State's office to inquire about this scenario where a person goes into the desk at the motor vehicle department and they come in to register a car. They are given right then and there a voter registration form. And I asked the gentleman at the Secretary of State's office, so what do they need to provide to demonstrate that they're a citizen and legal to register to vote? And I couldn't get a good answer. Wow. And that made me very uncomfortable. I'm wondering who all these voters are. And I would like to see something happen where the voter checklists, I mean, Burlington, I know someone who has moved to Maine, but she was on the Board of Civil Authority in Burlington, and she said, you would not believe. It's a mess.
Well, I know that in Rutland County there was a voter that voted absentee 2 or 3 weeks before the vote and then showed up at the polls and was given a ballot and had the ballot in their hand and then looked at the clerks and said, I just want you to know I've already voted. And the city clerk went ballistic that someone would even do that and threatened a lawsuit because that was totally illegal.
At least the person was honest.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge by that person about exactly what you're talking about. Who is making sure people aren't voting more than once? And this person could have voted. They would never have known. And the city clerk assured this person and the people that were questioning this that would never have happened. They would have caught it at the ballot box. No, they wouldn't have. The guy had it in his hand. He could have gone to the curtain, opened the curtain, filled it in, and slipped it right through. And it would have been, because it's a secret ballot, there's no name on it. There's no way that they would have known if somebody had voted twice, 3 times, 4 times. And these are the kinds of things. I know of another thing in Rutland where there was a contested vote here maybe 2 or 3 terms ago, and a ballot from one ward wound up in a bag from a different ward. Now, those are locked and sealed bags. How can you possibly get a Ward 1 ballot into a Ward 2 ballot? So, you're right. We have to have honesty with the voting process, or it becomes suspect, it becomes corrupt, and then you've got big problems. And you're talking big cities where illegal aliens, folks that came to this country illegally, are being allowed to vote. That is absolutely unconscionable and not fair.
It just takes away the honor and the privilege that we have to vote legally. I mean, it kind of counteracts what your vote is,
That's right. And I think, Linda, I think in Vermont it's probably a much tighter process, because I do believe that the folks that are sitting there at the table know a lot of who's coming in. They might question someone who's new.
At least in the smaller communities.
But you're not going to be able to do that when you can go the day of the vote and get yourself a voting record. Who's to say that I don't?
Oh, register the same day as the election. That's what our legislature has put into place.
When I got into politics, well, it was just when President Obama got elected, and I was just furious, and my wife made me get up off the couch like I'm challenging you, get up off the couch and go do something. And one of the first times that I ever did anything, because at that time they passed what I considered a ludicrous health care bill, which, as you'll recall, was nearly 3,000 pages. And I downloaded that thing, and I had it in a box that high. And Bernie Sanders was coming to Rutland, and he was going to go to the Unitarian Unified Church, which is down there on West Street. And sure enough, he showed up. But I wanted to get into that building, and I knew that it was going to be contentious, and there was going to be people on the left and people on the right and people in the middle. That place was going to be filled, and sure enough, it was. So I got there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was first in line, and I waited on the stairs. I was inspected by the Secret Service. I was inspected by the city police, because they couldn't believe what was in the box. But here's the caveat, goes to what Linda's saying. I'm there, first in line. Bernie comes down from his area with a bus loaded with people. The bus comes in the back side, what we call Cottage Street. He parks the bus in the back parking lot, and all those people go in the back door. They're in the seat when I finally get to go in. That is absolutely, totally wrong. I stood there in the cold from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock in the morning when they finally opened the doors. Those people came on a bus. He planted a busload of people. How many are on a bus? 64 people.
His supporters.
Yeah, they were all in there. And they were all on the right, booing the people on the left. You know,
wow.
And I spoke. I mean, if you go on Facebook and you look for a picture of me, Mike Lannon, Lannon, it'll come up, and you'll see me standing there shaking that box full of papers, the entire papers in my hand, shaking them at him, because I challenged him, and I knew, because Aristotelian, don't ask a question you don't have the answer to. I knew he hadn't read it. And he said, oh, yes, I've read it. Well, when did you read it, Bernie? Because it's not even 24 hours off the press. He never read that. Nobody read that down there. You recall that was a bill that was passed at 12 midnight that nobody had read? Nancy Pelosi said, we got to read it to understand what's in it. Hello.
Find out what's in it, yeah.
That's who we're sending to Washington to represent us?
Oh, please.
Not good. Not good.
Back to the voter checklist,
yep,
and integrity in the voting system.
Yep.
I included in my letter to the governor some suggestions for him to, I don't know, ask or expect, demand, whatever, of the Secretary of State that they implement a system where we have college students, out-of-state college students, voting in Vermont. That happened under Bernie Sanders.
That's right. That's how he won.
Yep. And we also have a lot of second homeowners. And how do we know where people are voting? So I suggested that there be a form that if you're an out-of-stater, your primary residence is out of state, whether you're a student or not, and you want to vote in Vermont, you need to get a form and fill it out through your town clerk that states that you will be voting at such and such a district in Vermont, and then sign it, and then that needs to be sent to the town clerk in your voting district in your where your primary residence is, so that they take you off of the local list. You don't get an absentee ballot to vote there and then as well vote here.
And I don't know enough about the constitutional aspects of all that, but I've got a deeper conservative view than that. I don't think they should be allowed to vote. If your primary residence is in another state, you don't get to flip-flop
I
all the
agree.
way. You vote
I
down
agree.
there. If you're a college student and you're at UVM, you don't get to vote in the state of Vermont. You're either a citizen of this state or you're not. And I suspect that was challenged when Bernie did it, and probably adjudicated with a Democratic legal system that found in favor of him. I don't know. I don't remember. I remember he got elected because he did that. But I can only tell you that, from my opinion, and I think most Vermonters would say, that is just totally wrong. Because you're right, Linda. If I vote here, I can vote more often. Just keep voting, baby.
Well,
vote once and vote often. Democratic ploy, as I recall.
Oh dear. Lot of things to be fixed, aren't there?
Well,
it's about integrity.
It's integrity, but it's also common sense, which isn't very common. And common sense would dictate that that's a crazy proposal to allow people to vote from outside the state of Vermont, from outside the boundaries. It just doesn't make common sense. It's just the same as the thing we just talked about as far as marijuana. It's not common sense. There's no common sense into allowing someone to have 4 plants, too small, too big, and an ounce of marijuana in their home for recreational use, and then and no plan in place to, at least Colorado was smart enough to have a revenue piece so that at least they're making some money.
This is the camel's nose under the tent. This is step number 1.
Don't you love it? Put the cart before the horse. I love driving carts that way.
Well, there'll be more coming. We'll have storefronts with people selling. And the young woman that I had on the show a couple of weeks ago from Colorado, where they have all this marijuana and sold everywhere, she said that they have international drug dealers in that community now. And by the way, just this last week, in our local paper, there was an article about the police finding out that there was a major drug dealer on Kingman Street in St. Albans in an apartment, and they found out the particulars about him, and they broke down the door, and they went in, and they found drugs like you wouldn't believe. He called himself T, and he was from Central America. Now, what is going to happen when the more we open the door to more people having access to marijuana?
Well, the drug program at the southern border has got to be stopped, and that's part of
big time
what Donald Trump basically ran.
Got to have that wall.
We have to build that wall, and I know there's lots of people out there who don't. We're the only country in the world that does not have a border.
A boundary.
Yeah, we're the only ones.
Yep.
Go on over to Poland and see, they don't have this problem. They have a ring around their country. You don't go in and you don't go out without them knowing about it. And they have dogs patrolling and all that. I don't know that we have to go to that place, but when you've got billions of dollars coming up from the south across the Rio Grande into this country, and death along the border because people try to stop it, and ranchers being shot, Go look up what's going on down there at that border and realize the amount of drugs that are coming in and who's using them. Our youth, our future. They're the ones. I'm not using them. Linda's not using them. So the older folks in this country that came up through the greatest generation, very few of us are using it. And you know what? There are a few people that came out of the Vietnam War, and I suspect there's a few that get hooked on them coming out of the war zones that we've had, like the longest war we've ever had, Afghanistan. They're a minimum number compared to what's being hooked down along the border and up into our major cities. And Los Angeles doesn't want to do anything about it. And why should I and you in Vermont have to pay a tax dollar to take care of those choices out there in California? Even though California is the 5th largest economy in the world, I don't feel that Vermonters should have to pay for that choice out there. Just saying.
Yep, I hear you. Well, are you aware, Mike, that the governor, let me see, it's Al Gobay, who is the chairman of the Vermont Healthcare, what is it called?
Oh, the Vermont Healthcare. Okay, that's
Yeah.
Yep. Vermont's healthcare program.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe it's the Agency of Human Services.
Probably
I'm not
underneath
sure.
that agency. Could be. Is that the one that Kevin Mullen was involved with for a while?
He's involved
Yep.
with the Certificate of Need
Okay.
program
Okay.
with a board, the Vermont Healthcare Board.
Yep.
No, this is Al Gobay. I can't remember whether he's the head of Agency of Human Services or not. He might be, but he's made the recommendation that there be a new 925 person corrections facility in St. Albans.
Oh, I heard about this. Oh boy.
Yeah. Now it would
And
be
it's
for
going to house
men.
who? Men. Okay.
Men. There would be a section for women, and then there would be a section or a service for what do you want to call it? Help with your problems. A facility there to help people through their issues.
Mental health problems, you mean?
Yeah, that
Okay.
type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
And they would also accommodate all of the inmates that are we have sent to other states because we can't afford to keep them in our
Yep.
facilities because we spend $60,000 per male and $70,000 in round figures for women to incarcerate them in Vermont. So we send them to other states.
For less
where
money
it's
or more money?
Less money.
Okay.
Because we have to do everything. We have to educate them, we have to nurture them, we have to, do every little thing.
Right.
I like the idea of helping people who are incarcerated by having a job for them on site. Have a big garden for them to raise their vegetables and
Yep.
things to cut back on the cost for the taxpayers, things like that. But there's a lot of to-do, a lot of resistance, a lot of discussion going on up here about whether that's something that we want here. And
Well, the
it
goody
sounds,
two-shoes aren't going to want someone who has to work for their prison keep.
well,
They're going to come after you and I when we make a suggestion like that. But I agree with you. Why should someone sit in prison for $60,000 a year and $70,000 a year? That's two people at $130,000, and they don't have to work for that money.
Is
They
this
don't have to
a way
do
to
anything?
create more jobs in Vermont? Are we expecting to have more people who need to be in jail?
So how do you build a rehabilitated character if you don't give someone the most important thing, self-esteem from work? Self-esteem is created because you work, you learn to work.
I'm a big advocate of work ethic.
If you don't have that pride in pride, Pride, personal responsibility and daily effort. If you don't have that personal responsibility and daily effort, if it's not ingrained in you, then crime is a good occupation if you don't get caught. But if you get caught, now you go to jail, and now you get to sit there and do all the things you just said. It's all given to you: your education, your free shower, your 3 meals, your television if you get one. The
I think
magazine.
you have to earn it.
I do too. Look.
I think whether
How many
this,
people in St. Albans could have their side? Do you still shovel a sidewalk?
no,
should
I
be.
no, I come in my garage entrance. I just open the
So
garage
somebody
door.
plows then?
No.
So
Well,
how do you
yeah, yeah, I
somebody
have-
Somebody has to take care of something that you shouldn't do. When I'm talking about Rutland County, when all these 80-year-olds are hanging around, who's shoveling their walks? I see people at that age out sweeping and doing these things. They shouldn't be out there doing that. Well, it does keep them alive because they have that work ethic, and that's what does keep people alive because they do it.
And you take
But-
pride in the fact that you can do it.
But there's plenty of things that this state could have done for a prison cell booth, bed, whatever. Make them work for it. You should write another letter. See what the governor says. See what the governor says about that, because that's
I write
very, very
letters to
interesting.
the editor. I write to the governor. I try to do, but folks, I just implore you. Maybe you folks who tune in and watch the show are folks who do pay attention, and you do your due diligence, and you know what's going on, and you take a stand when need be, and I respect that. I really do. But we need more people who are involved at the local level on boards and committees, and have a say what's going on, because all in all, government is in control of our schools, of our environment, what else? Of what they're not doing, but our new President Trump is determined to rebuild our military. We have thousands of planes that can't be flown because they don't have parts for them.
That's a dangerous situation.
You bet it is. With the world the way it is today, we have to have a military that's up and running, the best in the world.
Well,
that's our protection.
It's interesting, because not to be a fearmonger, but most people don't know that we have B-52s and we have stealth bombers flying over North Korea every single night right now. We have one of the best ever aircraft carriers, a stealth fighter aircraft located over there right now. So we're getting prepared to do what we have to do for the nut job that's in North Korea. And all of you out there that think that, well, we can't go to war for that. We can't afford to allow him to get the nukes. We can't afford to allow Iran to get the nukes. And most people, Linda and I know, we lived and know about what happened in Hiroshima. We know what happened in Nagasaki. We know what an atomic bomb can do. These guys that are now talking about, oh, it's no big deal, they have no clue. They haven't seen it. Okay, so when they say, well, I'm going to nuke so-and-so and I'm going to blow them off the face of the earth, they have no clue what the heck they're talking about. And so the people in Iran who believe that they'll take out Israel, and this guy in North Korea that believes he'll take out Los Angeles, oh my goodness, the wrath. That's what the Japanese did in Pearl Harbor. You want to talk about this country getting together in a hurry, try it and watch how fast we unite. We're not going to put up with that. We may have our disagreements in the country, but we are not going to, nobody in this country is going to allow, left or right or in the middle, going to allow us to be attacked that way. Never happen.
I often think that if all of us were taught about the true founding of our country and the principles and the Constitution and the rights and the responsibilities of individuals and everything, and what made this country great, then if we all understand that and appreciate what this country was founded to be, unique,
yep.
All right?
Yep.
How fortunate. And instead of whining and, these women on the march and...
Well, you said it earlier, Linda, because we're running out of time, and I'll let you have the last word, but I'm your guest. But principled men and women have to run the government. You cannot have corrupt people that we've got going on right now in all forms of government. We cannot have that. You've got to stop that.
But the only way that will happen is if you and I stand up for those principles, and then make sure we elect people who stand up for those principles.
That's why your TV show is so important. Is that we are the
and
voice.
Yours.
Well, we're the voice out there. That's in Vermont for sure. We're the anti-establishment voice. We are trying to tell you as you watch this show, when we come to a close here, what it's all about.
And we're closing shortly.
Yeah, we got 40 seconds, I think, something like that.
If that. Yeah. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda, again for having me come up. It's a pleasure always, and we cover a lot of things fast, I tell you. And,
well,
sometimes we get a phone call in, so next time I'm up, I'd be glad to have you call in.
I didn't encourage people tonight, and I should have.
I love talking to you, especially if you don't agree.
Well, thank you again, and drive home safely. I know you have a long drive. I appreciate your making the effort to come up here.
No problem, Linda. Invite me again about 9 years.
Oh, I will.
About 9 years, no.
No, not that long. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care and stay safe and be healthy, and don't worry about stuff like I do. I'll see you again next week. I have another super guest lined up. Good night.